What made me want to come back? I think I remember John pitched me the opening of the film, and we had both been a bit reluctant about trying to make a second one. But it was just an undeniable idea. And so I think I love this character, I love this family, and I love seeing them tested to the limits like the expansion of this world was bound to. It was never in the picture. I mean, it was never even discussed until the film came out, and it was obvious that people loved it and wanted to know what happens next. But even then, we were really reluctant to sort of entertain the idea of doing another one. And then I think ultimately it just came down to that John had this idea that he couldn't shake and felt he needed to do it. Evelyn is now completely alone and has 3 children, one of whom is a newborn baby. No home, no husband. Where does she go? Who's going to help her? What's she going to do? And enormous pressure is put on her shoulders to try and keep these kids alive. And I think she's someone who would ferociously go to the ends of the earth to protect her family. And this is what you're going to see in the second one. Some of the new dangers are really, the people that they encounter, as well as the further exposure to the creatures, because they've lost their home and their safe haven, and they were living in a very specific way that enabled their survival, and now that's been stripped away from them. So in the first one, if you're introduced to how did the Abbott family survive this and thrive to a certain level, you see how other people coped under in this harrowing environment. You see that fractured sense of community, that idea of not extending your hand to your neighbor. And here she is in a position where she desperately needs help. I mean, I think John always wanted to do something visually more ambitious and even more sort of high octane than the first film. And we had these extraordinary set pieces that he wrote, and then we managed to find locations for them in Buffalo, which really offered us these enormous abandoned industrial buildings, steel mills, coal mines, and that apocalyptic feeling that a lot of those abandoned industry buildings have. And he'd written these extraordinary set pieces that seemed impossible, and somehow they were completely realized by the incredible production designer, by the camera department, and John's vision for this was bigger. I think as the family ventures out, the world has to expand too. Well, I think you'll expect the same sort of muscular, tense, horrifying experience that the first one offered you. But I think if you have any investment in these characters whatsoever, you're going to feel very emotional for them going into this part 2, where the stakes are heightened exponentially for them. And so I think what I've gathered from people who sort of loved the first one is that they find this one actually very emotional, like watching these kids and this mother try to survive.
The idea for Quiet Place 1 came from these writers, Beck and Woods, who had come up with the idea. They wrote the original spec script, so the idea of a family in peril from creatures who, if you made a sound, they would kill you. That was all them, and I thought it was an amazing idea. When I read the script, I was initially offered to be in it as only an actor, and I thought if I rewrite and direct this, I could make it actually the greatest metaphor for parenthood that I had seen myself, which all producers love hearing that actors want to write and direct. That's a guaranteed yes. Very much not. It was a long process, and one that I had probably the greatest creative experience of my life is basically writing a love letter to my kids about what I thought about being a parent and what it really meant to what would you really do for your kids was about the first one. And so when the second one came along, I told the studio I didn't want any part of it. I told them that they should go off and make the movie without me. I didn't think I could ever articulate, this idea of parenthood as well as I did in the first one, have that personal experience. And as I think they were considering what to do next, I had this one idea, which was to make Millie the lead of the movie. And when I thought of that, it wasn't just because Millie would be fantastic in the movie. It was actually that I could actually continue the metaphor from the first one and make this as organic, as personal, if not more personal to me, because if the first one's a love letter to my kids, then this is a very hopeful dream that my kids could be as courageous, as hopeful, and as optimistic as these kids are. If the first movie's about that promise that you make to your kids that if you stay with me, I can protect you forever, all parents know that that's a false promise, but we make it anyway. And I think that that promise is inevitably broken. And when it is broken, I think that's what adolescence is. I think that's what growing up is. And that's where Millie came in and that character came in. She was able to take this idea of loss and this idea of what do you do in the darkest times and soldier on and be this hopeful, amazing character. The movie inevitably had to be bigger, not because it was a sequel, but because the Abbott family had to leave the farm. And I think that when the Abbott family leaves the farm, because it's been compromised and the barn burns down, they have to go into the outside world. And I didn't go bigger into the outside world because I thought it would be cooler for a sequel. I went outside because that's what happens. So that scene where they come to the end of the path was one of the first things I had thought of, because right there it sort of encapsulates the idea that the next step they take will be uncharted waters, and the idea that the next step you take could be the one that kills you. And it sort of amps up the terror, it amps up the intensity all by itself, organically, story-wise. And so then it's about where do they go? And I just kept remembering all the rules of the first one, and instead of going to the coolest place, I went to the one that makes the most sense, which is they're going to go to wherever the fire's been lit and where they know someone will be waiting for them, good or bad. And so they arrive at the steel mill, which they hope is a place that they can stay quiet. And, you know, this larger world was so much fun to play with, because it was one of the things I thought about a lot on the first movie, which is how are other people living? If you don't have the security net of this father who's built this incredible system of safety, how do you live? And you live probably, Cillian Murphy's character is a reflection of exactly that, how other people would live in without a family, without the system of love, without the system of safety. You live in a scary world where you don't trust anyone. And so he becomes this very morally ambiguous character who you hope will become the hero of the movie, that you from a movie standpoint, you want him to be a hero, but in real life, you're kind of questioning him the whole way through the movie. The family obviously, very obviously, is changed by losing a member of the family. But I think that one of the beautiful things, and it's a cinematic thing, but something I really loved watching all these actors play with, was how are you impacted by that? I think that there is immediate loss and a sense of sadness, but I think the thing that they encapsulated so well is how do you carry on whatever legacy my character had? So certainly Millie, I think in a lot of ways, becomes my character and better than my character. And I think Noah becomes braver than he ever thought he could be. And Emily becomes this incredible mother in a way that she never knew she had to be, because she has to not only take care of all these kids, but she has to protect them, and she has to do crazy things to protect them. And so it really almost made each of the characters better, my character leaving. As sad as I was to leave the franchise, that was stupid, and I didn't think ahead too much, but it actually made all the characters better. It was really moving, if I'm honest. I think that coming back to this, when we were shooting the first one, we had no idea if anybody would see it. We had no idea, more than the success of the film being as amazing as it was really that we were so emotionally moved that people loved the movie and connected to the movie as much as we did. I think that there's something very particular about that. There's a high school level need that everyone has to hope that other people think what's cool, what you think is cool too. And we got that. And so I think coming back to this, we all had this new perspective of what we were doing was so special, and that this business is a fantasy camp. We're lucky to be in it any which way, but to be a part of something like this is an added layer of just an added layer of crazy lucky. The part that Cillian plays is a part that I was really excited to have in the world, which is, again, I think he's the representation of how other people are living. If you don't have that security of safety, that safety net of a system of love and protection that the father set up for the whole family in the first one, how would you live? You'd probably be a lot sadder. You'd probably be dealing with loss not particularly well. You wouldn't have anyone around you. and you'd be very untrusting. You'd be someone who doesn't believe that life can ever get better again. And as much as I loved that character that I wrote, there is no way I could have dreamt up a performance like Killian gave me. I think that he came into this world, he was a fan of the first movie, which I think is very clear by his unbelievable, sort of how nimble he is in this movie emotionally. He got exactly what we were doing, exactly why he was an important part of the movie, and he did a better job than I ever could have wrote. As far as Jaimin plays, I think, the representation of how other people are living if they're not living in darkness. If there was hope, how would people be living? And he encapsulates that perfectly. He is such a warm, beautiful human being as himself. And in his performance, he brings that and more. I think that he shows you the hopeful potential of what life can be again. He's the living version of, if we ever make it through, maybe we'd look like this. Well, it's one of those things where this movie, as corny as it sounds, is a thank you note to all the fans who watched the first one. I think that I realized in this process I was an audience member first before I was a director, a writer, and actor. And by that I mean there were all the terrifying feelings of why would you do a sequel? Why would you take what was so good about the first one and ruin it? And I was so scared of all those things, so I made it my mission and really worked hard to find a way into this story which was as organic as the first one. And that's why we ended up calling it Part 2, because it's actually a continuation of the experience. It is much bigger, it is much more intense, it is much scarier because you're more scared than the first one because you know these characters so well. You will feel the sound and the intensity of the moments much more because you know the rules of sound. You know what sound means. And I think that at the end of the day, all the things we got to play with was all because of the love and respect we got shown by the audience. So I hope that people get to go watch this and not only have as good an experience as they did on the first one, but a better experience.
Oh, it was wonderful. When I came back together with the cast, I felt like that no time had passed between the first film and the second film. It just felt like we were right back in place. I was with everyone again, and we just immediately found our relationship again. It was wonderful. Oh, doing the stunt work and the action work. I think this is a much more action-oriented film than the first one, so it was very exciting to see that come alive. A lot of running, a lot of running, a lot of other stunts like, well, I can't say much because I'll disclose parts of the film, but it was fun to see how people could figure out a physical problem and then how we could work it through without taking a lot of risks, without making it dangerous. So that was interesting. Oh, it's a huge change for Regan. And I mean, Regan really looked up to her father, looked up to Lee. She admired his courage. And when he dies, it just, she felt like she felt a burden. I now have to take on my father. I need to be the leader of the family. I can't be a child anymore. I have to quickly become an adult. And I have to find the competence. She had to find the competence in herself to do that. Her own fear is a big danger, Regan's own fear. Well, actually, that's a good question. You're making me think. She starts to doubt herself. I have something in mind. I have a goal, but can I achieve it? What if there are things out there that are worse than monsters that I have to face? Can I get over that? I think those are some of the underlying fears for her. When I first met them, Killian and Jaimin, both of them are very honorable actors and very down to earth, and also very eager to join this family. They wanted to know the backstory, the background of the world, and what would feel normal in this world. It was fun to see them discovering, part of their discovery, and they brought so much to the table. Oh, oh yeah, a lot of things, I guess. what you can expect from this is to see a deepening of the relationship of the family. And are there things more horrible than monsters out there? Can they adapt to a new situation, to a new life, to a new home?
For me, it's the success of the first one and the fact that John was coming around, championing this one ahead again the second time around. The fact that most of the members of the first one were in the second one, and but again, it was brilliantly the execution of the first one that really sort of spoke loudly.
I absolutely adore the first movie. I thought it was, you know, one of the movies of that year. It kind of blew me away. I went with my kids, and then the second movie, exactly as Jarman said, you know, the fact that the whole team was reuniting, and the script was so strong. So it was just a gift, really.
He's one of those characters that that was able to get away successfully, and trying to. I wouldn't say that he was struggling with survival, but he was trying to, you know, sort of like start a life someplace else.
The expansion of the world of the story means that they encounter people, other people, and my character is one of those. And there's a lovely circular story to my character, which is, I thought, is brilliantly written, and also he goes on quite an interesting journey emotionally, which is lovely to play as an actor. It's sort of a meditation on societally how we react to crises. Some people retreat, some people try to help. If you're an individual, if you're a group, so I guess my character is representative of some of those choices that people make, but how those, and I guess Millie's character changes everybody she meets, and my character, she changes most significantly, I think.
It's such a wonderful setting to be directed by John, and knowing that he's an actor in himself, and the way he's, you know, for the first time, you know, having an actor-director sort of like talk to you in a very more on an emotional tone of dialogue than the verbal, sort of like the usual type, you know. So that was unusual to be directed by you know, by John.
His favorite movie is Jaws, so that just tells you everything. And so to create a world, an atmosphere that is full of threat, but yet that the scares and the tension is all ratcheted up really by your imagination, or by the potential of what could happen, and by putting yourself into that position, and that the audience putting themselves into that position, and that's extraordinarily hard to do. I mean, you look at the masters of that, you know, obviously Spielberg, Hitchcock, whomever, you know what I mean? The fact that he can do that, like that, straight off the bat, is kind of, it's kind of amazing, and still be one of the nicest people in the world.
I think Killian has so much more running.
I did a bit of fighting.
Oh, you did that too?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, maybe when you see the movie, you'll see.
Yeah, sure. Once I get around to it, yeah.
Well, he did some excellent evasive driving.
My stunt were quite. I guess we had fun. I mean,
You had fun.
He was just patiently sitting next to me, and as I was
Trying not to
spinning the car
die,
around
yeah.
and trying to, you know, act like I was doing all that kind of, you know, knew what I was driving. But yeah, it was fun.
He knows how to drive.
Oh wow, yeah, so much edgier. I mean, we're dealing with the world in which you can't make a sound. Now we had to deal with the world You know, I mean, I guess we were, you know, sort of like a confined, in a very confined, you know, area. Now you're exposing yourself into the world outside, and like he put it, Killian put it, the others. You know, now you have to deal with the others that are out there that have, you know, successfully survived as well. And so what is their condition as well?
Whatever people loved about the first one, they're going to even love more about the second one, because it has all of that stuff, that emotion and that anxiety, but I think it expands it.
Where is the buzz? You said was mine.